Hello everyone, and I'm Heather, and I'm going to be talking about art. Since we're all quarantined here together and all having such a grand old time, and you surely have nothing better to do with your life than to watch me talk about art. Now, one of the things that I noticed about art is that there's always an aspect of storytelling. You can tell a story without even saying anything, without any context. And there are several different pictures of this example. They all use different methods of using it. But my favorite method, and I truly mean my favorite, is body language. When you have a face-to-face conversation with somebody without even thinking about it, you're taking in their tone, their facial expression, and their body language. Those are some key elements of communication that goes away over the internet. So with art, we are conveying this without even voice or without even context. So body language is even more key than what it was before. So we're going to take a look at a still frame that I was actually super impressed with from an animated show called Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure. Do not judge me until you've seen it. It's actually fairly good. And I will be looking at these two characters' body language, and by looking at it, you can actually probably tell me, without knowing the characters' names or anything, what is going on, without even looking at the face, purely by just the body. And those are the best pictures, where if you take away the facial expression, the body language speaks for itself. So the facial expression helps, but that's not actually even the most important part. So we're going to take a look at this picture, just so you have some context of what's going on. Here's what happened right before we get to this still frame. Roll clip.
No, you can do
I can't do anything! Why won't you just give up on me? Can't you see what I've done? Look around you! This is all my fault! I've done terrible things! All this time I tried so hard to prove that I was more than everyone thought, but they were right.
No, Cassandra. No.
Raps, I am so sorry.
All right, everybody. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. We're going to start with Rapunzel, who is on the right. So if you think about what Rapunzel's feeling, she's feeling, she wants to reassure Cassandra, she's open to Cassandra, she's willing to forgive, and she's ready to move on and bridge any gaps between the two of them. So she, desires for friendship. She's open and reassuring, and you can't really read that, but whatever. Do your best. Don't try too hard. This brush is obviously way too small. So with Rapunzel's body language, we have her hand reaching out and physically grabbing Cassandra's hand. Now, she's trying to give her some physical reassurance, not with just her words, but some physical reassurance that everything is going to be okay and they will always be friends. And Rapunzel her body, her chest, and pretty much everything is pointing directly at Cassandra. So her chest is pointing at her waist is pointing at her feet and her knees are pointing at Cassandra, and even her hair, like all the way back there, is pointing at Cassandra. And she's looking directly at her too. Now, from Rapunzel's perspective, she can't see Cassandra. I mean, we can, because we have a different perspective, we're the audience. So everything is pointing towards Cassandra. And so we get this feeling of desire and openness, really, and reassuring with that hand. And of course, you can see she's got the concerned look on her face. Rapunzel's body language is super simple, and that's because her thought process is super simple in this scene, and she's being super truthful and open, and she's more than willing to forgive Cassandra and move on. So we'll move on to Cassandra over here, who has a much more complicated feelings, and so she has a much more complicated body language. So we're going to focus in on her mostly, because she's got some super interesting body language going on here. So, brush, new color, okay. So for Cassandra, she feels, shame, guilt, but she also desires for friendship and all those good things. And of course she feels embarrassed. Of course, we don't have to write that all out. So she also feels embarrassed. So to get all these feelings strictly into the body language, this is what we have going on. So for Cassandra, for shame and guilt and embarrassment, because they kind of all go hand in hand, we have her head pointing away, so she can't even look at Rapunzel, and she feels quite ashamed. Her fist is tense. Her fingers are tense, and her fingers are kind of tense here, but you can't really tell because Rapunzel's got her hand. But her hands are clenched, really, and they're pointing away, which, she also feels tense, I guess, like afraid. So tense would be one, and that would aid that. To emphasize that feeling of being afraid and kind of hiding from Rapunzel a little bit, and kind of also hiding from herself and her own embarrassment. With these two characters, when they're standing side by side, Cassandra here is actually a few inches taller than Rapunzel. So it's interesting that she's actually on a lower level than Rapunzel, so her body is actually pinching up and down. They're pinching in to give that feeling of hiding. So they're pinching up in there, and they're also pinching inward right here a little bit. You can feel it more than really see it. Her shoulders are up here. That also aids to the fact that she's feeling tense and afraid. Whoa. I cannot spell, but whatever. I'm an artist, not an English major. But for that feeling of desire and wanting to make amends, Cassandra does not pull away when Rapunzel grabs her hand, and her chest is sort of pointing at Rapunzel, and that it really aids the fact that she's actually really listening. Her ears are pointing towards Rapunzel too. She's listening to what Rapunzel has to say, but her knees here too are also pointing at Rapunzel. So to give a really quick recap of what's going on here, we have for Cassandra, for shame, guilt, and embarrassment, we have her head turned away, her hand turned away, her body pinching inwards a little bit, and her crouching down, really giving that feeling of hiding. And then for tense and being afraid, we have the hands being clenched, and we have the shoulders tensing up really high up there. And for openness and desire, we have chest point kind of pointing at Rapunzel. Her knees are pointing at Rapunzel. She does not turn away when Rapunzel reaches for her hand, and her ear is pointing towards Rapunzel to give that feeling of, I'm listening, I want it to, but also that I need you to reassure me, I need you to help me understand that everything's going to be okay. So that's why I think this scene is really, pretty amazing. You've got super simple Rapunzel body language that is all that needs to be, and if you add any more, you can make it actually a little bit too complicated, and it really fits what Rapunzel's trying to tell Cassandra. And then you have Cassandra with much more complicated body language and really conveying what may be sometimes considered conflicting feelings, and they work together into this really interesting pose. And what's really cool is that if you wipe away their facial expressions, you still get the same feeling. We didn't even really touch their facial expressions all that much, and not even Cassandra's. I mean, even with Cassandra's facial expression, you can see it a little bit. The looking away, she's looking away, and she's got the concerned brow. But I do think it's interesting, actually, to aid that hiding shame, embarrassment, and guilt. We have Cassandra's middle bang right here, covering up her face. So Rapunzel can't see her face at all, but for the audience, we can see Cassandra's face, but it's actually pretty well concealed by her hair and that middle bang right there. So it's kind of hiding her left eye, and this is falling over her right eye just a little bit. And she's looking down, so it makes her eyes look smaller too. So that gives you that feeling of hiding, and that her brows are super small. Not her brows, her eyes are super small. So that we see her expression, it's emphasizing what she's feeling. She's really hiding away from Rapunzel, because that's whom she's wronged the most. But she's also kind of hiding away from the audience by putting that middle bang there and having her hair really, fall over her face, and making those eyes a bit small and with the concerned brows. And her hair, we see a lot more of her hair in general than her actual face. Like, if you think about how much space her face is taking, it takes way less than the hair. There's way more hair to look at than anything else. So that even really helps out. And that's not so much the facial expression either. It's more about, well, this is where we're going to place the hair to emphasize that feeling. So yeah, I mean, that's about it for this one still frame. But I'm going to move on to the anime sequence that comes after this, because that's also super fascinating. It all stems from this body language, but you can see the thought process change. So we're going to switch over to that. We're going to talk about Rapunzel first, because we can see her thought process change a little bit. So yeah, she sits there for a good little bit. So Rapunzel is on the same level as, well, almost, but she's trying to get on the same level as Cassandra. And we'll take note of the gaps between them and all. And she's got her hand right here. As we scrub through, we're going to see Rapunzel inch physically closer to Cassandra, trying to physically bridge that gap between them. She will lean in right here. So she's gonna lean. This is a step. So the first step is that Rapunzel is totally gonna lean way closer, and she's trying. It almost looks like when she tilts her head a little bit, and we can start to see that eye right there. That she's trying to see if Cassandra's listening, or that she understands. So that gap between them is way smaller. More so with the head than with the body. But she's trying to physically bridge that gap and trying to reassure Cassandra even more that she's forgiven and all's going to be okay. So you see that gap shorten. And she leans in, and she's going to stay here for a second, as if she's trying to see if Cassandra gets it. And she starts to smile a little bit, like, whoop. So she starts to lean in even closer, but simultaneously, and we're going to get rid of these lines. So she starts to lean in even closer, but she starts to also grab Cassandra's hand, and she grabs it, and she kind of yanks it towards her. Not yank, but pull it closer. So trying to get Cassandra to look at her and to get her physically closer, because Cassandra's not moving. And she's going to even urge Cassandra to look at her and to get closer. If you notice that when she's trying to get Cassandra to look at her by pulling on her hand, we'll see her hand pull this way. Her facial expression starts to become more open, and she's smiling, which is a much more an accepting type of face. Oh, hang on. I'm going to highlight these. And so you'll see that. No, I'm not going to highlight that because that's distracting. And, well, as we go forward, you'll see that. So she pulls on Cassandra's hand, and Cassandra finally starts to look. Rapunzel sits there, and she's smiling at her. So you see, like, right there? And she pulls it just a little bit closer to get her to look at her. We'll see that right here. Focus right there. It sits, and then boom. She's closer. Cassandra, prompted by Rapunzel's tug, looks at her. And her head has to move ever so slightly. So Rapunzel sees some movement. And we sit here for a second. And Rapunzel keeps talking. And it looks like Cassandra is considering what Rapunzel has to say. Then she turns. She finally looks at Rapunzel. Finally. Cassandra fully turns her head, so she's finally looking at her. Cassandra is looking at her. Cassandra has bridged that gap a bit more herself by having her head come closer in. Her head is now pointing at Rapunzel. Her knees are pointing at her, and her chest is fully pointing at her. So Cassandra's body language is starting to mimic Rapunzel's a little bit. Her head gets a little bit higher, so it's ever so slightly less tense. She's looking at her, but you can still tell that Cassandra still a bit afraid and tense, and she still feels a lot of shame and guilt right now still, because her shoulders are still pretty high up here. Like, maybe in this one not so much. I don't know where that one is exactly. You can't see her neck at all. So since you can't see her neck, her head's down. So she's still kind of hiding from Rapunzel a bit by pulling her head down, and still she's hiding behind her hair still. That middle bang is really strategically placed right in the middle of her face. Her head's down, and so she still has that feeling of being kind of scrunched in and hiding a bit. When Cassandra fully turns her head towards Rapunzel, Rapunzel's got this really nice, pleasant, and open expression. And then, oh, we get this part. And everybody loves this shot, because this is a very nice looking shot. So, you can tell that she's tense, because look at that, her body is still kind of really pinching inward from this angle. Her middle bang is sealing even more of her left eye than last time. Kind of getting this from Rapunzel's perspective, so we're seeing what Rapunzel's seeing. Cassandra is peering out, and from her shell, from her hiding place, and you only really see this eye. This eye is pretty well hidden by the hair. And of course she's got the concerned brow still. She's not smiling at all. And her body's still tense. And we'll see this change just a little bit actually as we scroll through this. So she's listening, she's considering what Rapunzel has to say, and then you start to see her facial expression relaxes first a little bit. So her eyes widen if you look at right there. See, everything's kind of tense. Her eyes have relaxed. Her mouth has relaxed. And now her eyebrows are starting to go up to give the idea that everything's really relaxing. Her body starts to go out a little bit. Her shoulders, I think her shoulders drop a little bit even. Let me see that. No, they just kind of, yeah, they do drop, but it's more like to support the turn. And her body opens up a bit more. So her facial expression relaxes first because she's reacting. And then we go right here. That final frame. That final, thank you face. Now we see her full face. Her bang is still there. Maybe she's just still a bit shy. But we see her eyes. Her eyes are fairly wide right here. And this is more of an expression of gratitude. Now she's smiling. And we see her head full on. And this is what Rapunzel's saying. So now, it's all good. The friendship has been mended. And Rapunzel has graciously forgiven her. And life moves on happily. Well, after they defeat the villain, but whichever. So yeah, I just wanted to cover that because I thought this was a super cool animated piece right here, and I don't think this show doesn't get enough attention for its animation really, and you can tell in certain moments that this is super high quality, especially for a Disney Channel TV show. This is super high quality, and it's very pleasing to watch, and it's very fun to look at and study as an artist, as an animator, because you can learn stuff from this right here. So yeah, that's all I got to say about this stuff. So cut to the outro. hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you like this type of thing, if you'd like to see another video of a different type of storytelling with art, or just different things about art in general. Let me know if you like it, and I'll see you next time. Bye. See ya. Peacing out. Huh? That doesn't really make any sense.